Hey, good morning. It's an honor to have you here. My name is Drake. I'm the pastor. It's really good to have you on this post-snowy day. It's been a very snowy last 2 weeks, has it not? Man, crazy. So really glad to have you. Good job. You made it. Excited for today. We are in our series, Trip Around the Sun. We are on day 26 of this new Trip Around the Sun that we started. And you're on this trip whether you signed up for it or not, so welcome to a new year. And we're trying to leverage intentionally this new year. We've been doing some work. You can always go back and catch on our podcast, our YouTube channel, the work that we've been doing through this series, and it's intentional to help us as we lean into the new year together. So really grateful for all that we've had the chance to walk through up to this point, and excited for today. Just really briefly before we get started, our mission here at City Church is to help people find their way to God from where they are. And we do that by practicing the way of Jesus together in Boulder. So what that means for you is no matter where you're walking in on your spiritual journey, you're loved, you're safe, you're welcome. We're so glad to have you here. Our desire is to meet you where you are, help you take some next steps in your relationship or journey with Jesus. And so hopefully all of that is experienced and felt by you as we kind of take this journey together. And so grateful to have you here if you're in person or online, if you're new with us or new-ish. Really, really glad to have you. If you're a part of this family, really grateful to have you on this snowy day. And before we get started today, we're going to have just kind of a family meeting moment, if that's okay with you. Not that you have a lot of choice, but that's what we're going to do anyway. And so we did a series back in the fall called The New Family of Jesus. And so we believe that what God is doing here in Boulder and all around the world through his church is way more than just like weekend gatherings and butts in seats and things like that, but rather it is this new family that Jesus is building and growing and redeeming, and so we're grateful to be one of the local expressions of God's new family here in Boulder. And so as we kind of go on that journey together, there are moments when like there's big transitions in family, right? Like depending on the context that you grew up in, there are moments when your family goes through large transitions. Some of them you choose, some of them you don't. Maybe many of you remember the moment when you left home for the first time. Like I was 17 years old, packed up my truck with all my clothes, and I headed out, and I didn't cry. At least not that anybody could see, and my parents cried as I left, that whole shebang. So today there's going to be tears, okay? That's what we're doing today. It's Seth. There you are, Seth. Very good. So in just a moment, I'm going to bring our friends up, Seth and Maddie. And City Church, it's interesting because Boulder is so transient that many of you know these two leaders very well, and some of you have never met them in your entire life, and that's totally okay. We believe that Jesus wants us to continually honor in 1,000 different ways, but especially our leaders. And so Seth and Maddie have been core leaders here at City Church since the very beginning. So for those of you that don't know the story, we launched City Church in 2019. We're just over 5 years old now, and by God's grace, we survived COVID, and we're still here. And Seth and Maddie have been key leaders as a part of this community and this family since day one, okay? And so we're going to take some time today to honor them because this is their last Sunday with us before they leave for California. That's sad. I know. But at the same time, we're going to honor them and we're going to pray for them as a family and as a community. But I want to give you just a quick moment of why we're honoring them. There's plenty of people. This church is incredible, and there's plenty of honor to give out. And in fact, we don't do it enough, right? Even as much as we try, we still don't do it enough. But there is also a unique opportunity to honor those that go above and beyond. And I want you to know, Seth and Maddie have been incredible leaders at City Church in a variety of different ways since we launched. And I don't think it's like too much in saying that City Church would not be here without Seth and Maddie, right? I mean, I think that's the case. I mean, they were here like back in the day when summer hit 2019, and there's like 4 of us in the lobby because it was so depressing in here to have 4 people in a room, right? Like it was like, okay, let's be depressed out there together. So they were here at the beginning, launching, doing everything we could to get a life-giving church off the ground. They've been through it all, highs and lows, and they have served in incredible ways. But what you need to know is they have served as volunteer staff team members really since the beginning. And what that means is that they've never been paid a dime for anything they've ever done, and they have given a ridiculous amount of sacrificial time and energy and resources to seeing this family thrive. Can we honor them for that? It's amazing. They've been a part of City Church since the beginning. Maddie was like in the door before we even launched. I'm talking like door hangers where we're just like letting the community know we even exist. We would tape these straws to the door hangers that say "we don't suck" on them. True story. That's hilarious, by the way. And then we would put these door hangers on people. And so Maddie was there for that. Probably still has a straw if we're lucky, right? So Maddie beat Seth to the game. But I remember the day that Seth rolled into the City Church parking lot. We had just taken over the building. We had just launched. And he packed up his entire life and his half-blind dog into this little like dinky U-Haul and rolls into Boulder like just with like a let's go mentality. And God called him here to help us start and plant City Church. And I remember our first staff retreat. We're getting away. It's like the first year. Seth is there with the rest of our staff team, and then we hired Maddie for childcare. And I remember just very conveniently at the end of this evening, we got rented this cool house in the mountains, and there was a pool table downstairs, and very conveniently, Seth and Maddie kind of gravitated downstairs and started to play pool together. That's really what they were doing. That's not what they call it these days. It was really pool. And so they just like kind of got lost in pool for a few hours, and then it started. That was maybe the beginning, maybe not. That's just what's in my memory of the journey of eventually they would get married here at City Church. Come on. Let's go. One of my claims to fame. So anyway, it's really cool to look back and watch all that God has done into this community, all the lives that have been impacted, all the new followers of Jesus that have been made thanks to their obedience. And now they are stepping into a new season where God is calling them to California. And we say often that we exist, our mission is not just for Boulder, but we exist for Boulder, the West, and the world. That God's kingdom and his mission is not just here. It's absolutely contextualized and central to what we call home, but it's way bigger than just the story God's writing here. And so then today we have the privilege of praying over them and sending them out. And honestly, quite a privilege to send some of our best leaders across the mountain range here to California, and really for the purpose, for the burden of seeing more disciples made. And so this is not just a flippant, I want to put my toes in the sand kind of version of a move. This is a call from God that has been fought through and wrestled with and resisted and prayed through and had tons of wise counsel spoken into. And so this has been a long journey. I don't have time to give you all of the story today, but it is great to hear. And so I would recommend, if you want to hear it, you can hear it from Seth and Maddie. But today is their last Sunday gathering with us, okay? And so I'm going to invite them to come up here. And we're just going to take a moment, and we're going to pray over them and bless them. And so if you guys will stand with me, church, for a moment. And if you're new, you're a guest here, like just play along, okay? I get this is kind of a family meeting for a moment. But Seth and Maddie, if you guys will stand right here. And then church, if you guys take a moment with me, then just kind of in solidarity together, you can extend a hand in like prayer and favor over them. And I'm going to lay my hands on them. And we're going to say a prayer of blessing as we send them out today, okay? So God, thank you so much for Seth and Maddie. They have stewarded so well the life that you have given them. They have been a gift in 1,000 different ways to so many different people that there's not enough time probably in the year to celebrate them appropriately. But they didn't do it so that they can get celebrated on a Sunday. They did it because of your great love. They did it because of what you're doing in them, what you have done through them, and what you continue to do. And so, Jesus, we want to take a moment and bless who they have become. God, we've seen your hand on their life. We've seen who you formed them to be. They're not the same people that we knew 6 years ago, and we're not the same because of them. And so, God, right now, we bless your work in their life. We bless what you have done. We bless who they have become. But also, God, we bless this next season of what you are doing. God, we pray for favor in the hearts of their family, those that need healing and hope and wholeness from you. God, that their family could know the same love that Seth and Maddie have experienced and known and the relationship they have with you. God, I pray that they would step into that space confident that they carry the light of the world with them. But also, God, we know that you're not just taking them there for their immediate family. You're also taking them there for many others who don't know you yet. And Jesus, I'm grateful that Seth and Maddie have married their life to the bigger calling of life is just more than about them. God, that you have a mission that you're inviting us to join and be a part of. And so there are many people who don't know you yet that they have the privilege of interacting with. And so, God, I pray for many disciples to be made, many people to see the goodness and love in and through their life, to hear about it with their lips, and then to desire it in their hearts. I pray for many, many stories of people being baptized in the ocean and in pools and wherever else they can find water. And then Seth and Maddie getting out of the way and watching as those that they have baptized would baptize others. God, we pray very specifically for your Spirit to fill them and go with them. God, we believe that you've called them to this next season, and we gratefully send them out. We grieve the loss of deep friends, but we joyfully say thank you for the gift that they have been to this community over the last 6 years. And God, we can't bless them near in what they deserve, but God, you can do more in and through their lives than we can ever ask or imagine. So we ask you to do that for them. It's in Jesus' name. Amen. Put your hands together for Seth and Maddie. We love you guys. We love you. All right, you guys can have a seat. Thank you so much for letting me take a moment and doing that. You know, there's a phrase that stuck out for Seth and Maddie. For those of you that know Billy and Gina, they've been some of our partners in Central Asia over the last couple of years. And they were here over the summer this last year, and they got to share a story how God sent them from out of this church to Central Asia, and they got to introduce an individual to Jesus, baptize him in the middle of a really challenging context, teach him to follow Jesus and help him to make other disciples. And when Billy and Gina were back here sharing with us, they said, you know, at the end of the day, even if God sent us all the way across the planet just for that one person, it was worth it. And in the same manner, Seth and Maddie are carrying that heart to this next move. Oh man, God, even if he's just sending us over there to see Maddie's brother and sister come to know Jesus and her parents come to, like, it's worth it for that. But also we know that God has much more planned for them. And so one more time, let's celebrate them. And today we are talking about time. We're talking about our time. You and I have this interesting relationship with time. It's one of those things that we live in the middle of, we can be wildly unaware of, and we can also waste very easily and then have immense regret around it all simultaneously once we realize what has happened. And so last week, we spent some time talking about what it looks like to live a life without regret. And today we're going to continue in that vein as we look at this new year, trying to posture our entire community around individuals who are following Jesus, apprenticing our entire lives, our minds, our hearts under Jesus and the way that he lives, letting him reorient our desires from the inside out. And so what I want to talk to you about today is that all regret, like we talked about last week, has a time-sensitive element to it. Does that make sense? Every moment that we struggle with that has to do with regret, it also has a time-sensitive element to it. That regret is based on something that we wish we could have done differently, right? And there's 1,000 different versions of it that we talked about last week, but we're going to talk about time today. A.W. Tozer says it this way. He says, when you kill time, it has no resurrection. That's the big issue, right? When you and I kill time, it has no resurrection. We can't get it back. There's no rewinding the clock. You guys remember those old school, anybody seen a VHS like tape before in their life? Right? Okay, I know, like we got different generations of people in here, right? So back in the day before Netflix, there was these things called DVDs, right? I know that's crazy. It's a circle, got a hole in the middle, okay? But before that, there was these VHS tapes. They were like black squares, and they had actual film in the middle. This, I know you're like, what are we talking about? This is crazy, I know. But you'd have to hit rewind on your VCR. What's a VCR? Let's Google it, okay? Rewind, you can rewind a tape and move back and forth. Anybody, you tracking with me a little bit? Okay, I know it's a throwback. I know we don't live there anymore. But, right, there is no rewind button on life. You and I don't have that option. And so when you and I kill time, it has no resurrection. And so here's what I think you know, and I just want to kind of catch us up to speed, probably put us all on the same page. We might not walk in with this awareness, but you definitely are aware of it. You and I live in the most time-aware generation to date. We have efficiency out the wazoo, whatever that is. We have efficiency like in every nanosecond of life, right? We do our very best to make the most of every opportunity, if you will. We live in a culture where time is a commodity. And so we have time-saving devices that do anything but save us time. They actually rob us of the very life that we live in. And so you and I are the most time-aware generation to date. We are also the most time-poor generation to date. And listen, you don't take my word for it. Just give it a quick Google, and you don't have to look very far. You don't even have to be a Jesus follower to agree that time is considered a commodity in the current culture that you and I live in. We live in what psychologists are calling an attention economy, as in the most valuable thing that you and I have to give is not our money, but our time. And so then everyone is vying for your time. The more that they can take away, the more money they make. And so while we are the most time-poor generation to date, here's the crazy reality. We live in this attention deficit where the current average human attention span is 8 seconds. Some of you are like, what'd you just say? Exactly, right? Now here's what's sad. You and I are losing the attention economy game to goldfish. The average goldfish has an attention span of, wait for it, 9 seconds. You and I are losing to goldfish with our attention span currently. Isn't that sad? And so have you ever had the moment like where you're saying the phrase, pay attention? You ever talking to it like, hey, pay attention, pay attention. Or you ever said it to yourself when you're just totally distracted? Come on, pay attention. Have you ever thought about those words, to pay attention? What is it getting at, right? To pay attention, as in you have to give your attention somewhere, therefore it can't be given somewhere else. It is a commodity that you are directing in an area. So when you're trying to say, hey, pay attention, it is use your attention and give it in this manner, and therefore you can't give it elsewhere. Just like a bank account, you have an attention account, if you will. And so let me just give you some stats that you already know, and this is just to make you feel really good about yourself today, okay? Now, let me say this. It's really ironic. We're in the middle of this 21-day fast, right? We kicked it off last week. How's it going? Woo! So those of you that haven't jumped on the 21-day fasting and prayer train, we did a message on it 2 weeks ago to kick it off, to give you the tools to make the most of it. And part of it is redirecting our attention and our affection. And what's ironic is I've known all week that I was teaching on the concept of time today. And I had the biggest battle with time I can recall in the last 5 years. It was the most depressing week for me. Anybody else? You guys feeling great? Okay, good. You can hear about my depressing week. It was so frustrating this week, the battle for my attention. I'm like, how ironic is it that I have all of the resources I'm going to share with you today, all of the exciting, all the things we're leaning into, and I felt like I was getting hit from every angle in ways that I never am competing with. And so today, I'm kind of speaking from a place of, hey, I'm in the boat with you on this, so don't let guilt and shame try to be a motive here. It doesn't last very long. Let's get a vision for something better in our lives, which is what we're after, okay? So let me just give you a couple of fun stats on the average American to date. So the average American currently spends 4 to 5 hours on their phone every day. 4 to 5 hours on their phone every day. And I'm going to give you some more because I got to use it for work and this or that. 45 hours on your phone every day. By the way, all the stats that I'm about to share, they go up the younger someone gets. Okay, so this is an average across America, but these stats are higher in your young 20s and teens as well. The average American touches their phone 2,600 times a day. 2,600 times a day, right? There's just this constant. It's like a drug that we're addicted to, right? It's constantly there. Now, this is crazy. Listen. The average American views 6 hours of digital video content every day. And actually, we have seen now that video content is streaming higher through apps like TikTok, which is still here for just a little bit. I was going to make a joke 2 weeks ago that you can't fast from TikTok anymore, and then they totally messed it up. So here we are. But anyway, right? So actually, we're seeing different versions of video access, YouTube, social media platforms that are giving you access to video content, higher usage in that space than even Netflix and other streaming services now in our current generation. So the average American views 6 hours of digital video content per day. That's across every version of it. That's bananas. The average American spends over 2 hours and 15 minutes a day on social media alone. The average American, Yeah, okay, so those are just a few of them. And teenagers, those stats are higher, okay? So just you add those numbers up, and it's kind of scary how much time we're using. As we're looking at this trip around the sun, how much time is being dedicated to things that we can't get back. And here's why I give that. Not because I want to make you feel bad about the things that you do on your downtime or whatever. Here's the point. When's the last time that you had a really hard day? You're exhausted, maybe you're stressed, life just kicked you in the teeth, relationships, whatever, work was hard, whatever it was. When's the last time that you had a really hard day and you're like, man, I just need to relax. My soul needs some rest. You know what I'm talking about? That deep soul and body and mind fatigue. So when's the last time that you were there? You're like, I'm there right now. Okay, that's fair. So when's the last time you were there? And then you said, you know what I'm going to do to meet these deep needs of my soul? Binge watch my favorite series on Netflix, or scroll YouTube until I die, and then doom scroll into oblivion until I finally fall asleep. Now listen, your soul is weary, your mind is weary, your body is weary, everything's hard, and you're like, oh man, I need some rest. And then you pick up that fix alongside whatever else. And here's what I'm curious of. How many of you, when you got done with that thing, which we've all done to different degrees, right? How many of you, when you got done doing that, you were like, oh, yes. Wow, I feel so much better. I feel so much more like Jesus right now. It's my soul is renewed. I'm a brand new person. My identity is so clear. I'm lifted up and encouraged. I am so secure. I've got more peace than I had when I started. Has that ever happened to you? Not one time. Not one time. Nobody like, wow, I'm the most terrible person on the planet. Not only are all those people that I just watched better than me, I just wasted all this time proving that I'm not as good as they are. That is not, isn't it crazy that we can literally fall into this trap of vying for our attention and then look up only to realize, wow, we're not getting that back. And we're no better off for it. Now listen, this is not to throw rocks at your favorite TV show or the benefit of technology. It's not what we're doing. It's just realizing like, man, how many of us have been there when we look at the use of our time and there's like this battle with it, like we just cannot master time. Now, wouldn't it be like helpful? I mean, we live in this culture that there's a time poverty and an anxiety that is everywhere, and it lives in the church and outside the church. Like, wouldn't it be helpful? Wouldn't it be amazing if there was someone that was outside of time that could like teach us how to live in right relationship with time? Wouldn't that be convenient? If someone understood time properly, could help us relate to it appropriately, and then could actually walk with us through that. Yeah, right? Like, okay, meet Jesus, right? So Jesus, who steps outside of time into time, God in the flesh, to literally live the life that you and I are meant to learn from, to grow from, and then he would die the death we would deserve. He would be buried and raised again, proving he was who he said he was, and then he would offer anyone that life that would trust in him. So Jesus, the very one that not only understands time, but then can teach us to relate to it appropriately, he has an offer for you and I today. Listen to Jesus' words in Matthew 11, 28 through 30. Jesus' invitation listen, if you're a follower of Jesus in the room, this is for you. Every moment of every day. If you're not a follower of Jesus in the room, this is for you. If you've been hurt by the church, this is for you. If you've started following Jesus, walked away from Jesus, and are trying to reconsider things, this is for you. If you're not sure if you even staying through the whole service today, this is for you. Not from Drake, this is from Jesus. Come to me. All. All means all. All you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So you take the attention economy that you and I live in, to where we just easily are looking up and wasting time on things that we know we wish we wouldn't have spent it on top of the busyness that we live in, the ambition that we have, the demands of life, the season of life that you're in, the things that you have a choice over and that you're like, man, I'm in school, or I'm parenting young children, or I'm single and working 80 hours a week, or like you got 1,000 different demands on your life on top of the attention economy grabbing for your time. And here's Jesus' invitation. Come to me. Learn from me. Walk with me. Let me teach you to live life in a different manner. Listen to the words: rest, easy, light. When you think about following Jesus, what are the 3 words that you would put alongside it? For a lot of people, the last thing that they hear when they're imagining what it means to follow Jesus is rest and easy and light. Listen to Frederick Brunner on this passage. He says when Jesus is talking about a yoke is a work instrument. Think 2 oxen that you tie together for pulling a load, right? Thus, when Jesus offers a yoke, he offers what we might think tired workers need least. They need a mattress or a vacation, not a yoke. But Jesus realizes that the most restful gift that he can give the tired is a new way to carry life, a fresh way to bear responsibility. Isn't that good? This is the invitation from Jesus. Not numbing yourself into oblivion, not busying yourself so you don't have to think about it, but a new way to carry life. It's not on the screen, but Brenner goes on to say that when you operate in the world of realism, we understand that life is going to always be a succession of burdens. There's no version of like just on the beach 24/7 Corona in hand, right? Like life is going to be a grind. Thus, instead of offering escape, Jesus offers a new way of grinding. Does that make sense? That's the invitation, to yoke yourself with Jesus. Imagine the picture. Jesus is saying, come yoke this life with me. Let's carry it together. Walk in step with me, and I will teach you a new way to be human. That is the invitation on offer. Not just a mental rearranging of the furniture of what you believe about yourself and God, but letting that belief inform how you behave. A way of life, a way of living. 3 weeks ago, we talked about how Jesus' invitation is a broad invitation and a narrow way. So today we're going to talk about that. In our teaching text today, in Ephesians 5, that Sarah read for us earlier, Paul has some really helpful and practical words for, I believe, you and I in 2025 in this season as we live together and practice the way of Jesus together in Boulder. Now, for those of you that haven't read the letter to Ephesians, you can go do it on your own. It's beautiful, and it's helpful, and it's so good. Paul has done some incredible work up to this point, building a beautiful theology for this church in Ephesus. So much like he'd be writing to a like City Church in Boulder, right? It's kind of a letter to the church in Ephesians. That's what he's doing. And he's built for 3 chapters this beautiful theology around who they are in Jesus, like the new life that they have, like trying to get into their heads and their hearts the reality of this new life, born into the family of God, a new identity. You've been saved and set free, right? You have the power of the Holy Spirit in you. He's doing all of that work, and then now he is shifting, saying, okay, friends, like once you understand who you are, and once you really get a hold of the love of God for you, you let that identity be formed and shaped on the inside, then it should have external exercises as well. Like you need to live consistently with who you actually are. Like the other day I was talking to my son Grayson, and he just did something that was like, I don't know, it was just out of character for him, right? Like he did something mean, and I looked at him and I was like, hey man, what was that about? And he's like, I don't know. And I was like, I don't know either. And then I had a couple options. I could just say, we don't do that, which sometimes we have that conversation. But by God's grace, I had a moment where I'm like, hey, I should speak into his identity. So I got down and I looked him in the eyes. And I said, Grayson, that's not who you are. Right? Like, I don't know either why you did that. But the way that you responded, that's not who you are. That's not how you normally treat people. And I tried to remind him of who he really is, right? That this is what Paul's doing, is saying, hey, in Jesus, once you trust in Jesus, who you really are, you're going to live from that place. We're going to live consistently within that identity. And that's where these words in Ephesians 5 come from. It's kind of the apex. He's been doing a lot of work, and chapters 4, 5, and 6 are all leading to that place of how to live and work out this new life in Jesus. So here's Paul's words. Be very careful how you live. Other translations use the word how you walk. So think of Jesus, it's not just a belief system, a belief structure. It is that for sure. It's not just a set of ethics. It is that, but it's way more than that. Be careful how you walk. Not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. As in the world around you, the reality that you live in, the water that you swim in every day is doing everything to undermine who you're becoming. Is doing everything to distort who you're becoming, is doing everything to work against the image of Jesus being formed in you, is doing everything to keep you away from the love of God. The days are evil. They're working against you. Therefore, don't be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. So let's just sit in this. We're just going to unpack it very simply today. A couple of helpful pieces of encouragement from Paul for you and I as we think about what it means to make the most of our time listen, think like long term. So there's like the life that we're living and who we're becoming, and like what we often call like eulogy virtues, right? Like what are people going to say about you when you're dead, right? And a lot of the things we give our time and attention and energy to, they're not going to matter, right? Laying on my deathbed, let me see my bank account one more time. Yeah. Hey, bring those degrees to me one more time. There it is. Oh yeah. Bring my Call of Duty score to me one more. I just need to see it once more. Everybody else see it? I just want you to know. Let me hold the keys to that car one more time, right? The things that we chase so hard after are not normally the things that we care about the most at the end of our lives. So how do we live lives well spent? First, Paul says we're going to move from careless to careful, right? That's the first one here, verse 15. Be very careful. As followers of Jesus, the invitation is to move from a careless life to a careful life. Here's what I know about you. We can read stats all day long. We talk about the attention economy, and we talk about having the attention of a goldfish and all of that, and that's fine because they're true and they're frustrating, and we can wrestle with that. But here's what I know about you. Regardless of where you are on your spiritual journey, you don't want to live an accidental and careless life. You don't want to look up and wonder how you got there. You don't want to look back and look at just a wake of regrets in relationships and time and resources. You don't want that. All of us want to care, and yet it's so easy to live a careless life. This word careful speaks to giving the attention that it deserves, of where we put our feet. Think about walking, right? Right now, right? You're walking around in Boulder, and we're trying to get rid of all the snow, but there's still like little slippery spots, right? Anybody ever done like the total just both feet in the air, bust out? Yeah, man. Like you got to be really careful how you walk in that in between of the snow and the ice, and it's melting and there's layers, right? So that's the picture, is be careful how you walk. This adverb it signifies something that's done accurately, precisely, and it's given close attention to, right? So it's not like careful as in like you're timid. It's careful and as in well thought through, as in giving the attention that it deserves before you step into it. And so this can speak to, like, again, think about, man, what are my eyes seeing? And what are my ears hearing? And what is my heart consuming? Where's my affection pointed? Where's my time going? Most of us are not, honestly, we're not that careful with a lot of those things because they're so easily being taken from us. So he says, hey, you got to go from careless to careful. But then he doesn't stop there. He says we want to go from foolish living to wise living. Verse 15 and then verse 17, right? He says, be careful how you live as wise. So how do we be careful? Where do I put my feet? Like, how do I know what that means? Well, he says, hey, you're going to lean into being wise instead of foolish, right? Don't be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is, right? And is it Mr. T that said, I pity the fool? Is that it? Yeah, okay. Right, so that's the only version of foolish that you have in your mind. Let me give you some context, because sometimes we hear that word and we're like, well, I'm not foolish. Right? You have a picture of what a fool is. Let me give you, like, when the biblical narrative is speaking about foolishness, there's a very clear idea there that we need to understand. For Paul, the contrast to a fool is someone who understands God's will and lives into it. So someone who is not a fool, someone who is wise, understands God's will as in his purpose, his plans, his agenda, his good plans for your life and for those around you, the things that he is working. Someone who is wise understands God's will and lives into it. In the scriptures, wisdom is first rooted not in how much you know, which is one of the assumptions in the West, right? Information saturation is what we live in. Access to way more than we need to know, and very challenging to put it into practice. And so wisdom is not what you know in the scriptures, but rather who you know. Or maybe a better way to say it is, wisdom is not what you know, but what you worship. Proverbs says that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom or wise living. Here's what you might or might not know, but we'll put a name to it. Everyone on the planet worships. Everyone on the planet is a worshiper. Whether you're religious or not, whether you believe in God or not, everyone on the planet is a worshiper. Let me give you a definition to help you just wrap your head around that. Worship is putting something first in your life and then esteeming it as worth all of your time and your energy and affection. When I worship something, it is putting something first in my life and esteeming it as worth my time, my energy, and my affection. My entire life gets ordered around the things that I worship, even when it's not intentional. And so we gathered today, not because we were bored and we had nothing better to do on a snow day on a Sunday, but because there's something in us that says, man, there is this longing in my heart that is trying to go somewhere. And for many of us, we're saying, man, that longing is being pointed at Jesus. And for others of you, you're trying to discover what to do with that. So my buddy Danny here, he reminded me of a book that I love called Mere Christianity that I was looking back through this week. And so listen to C.S. Lewis' words on the fool from Mere Christianity. And listen, he's setting this conversation up by saying that there's this frustrating reality that all of us consistently run up against, regardless of your age, stage of life, where you are, religious belief, all that stuff. There's this frustrating reality that we run up against of the things that we're chasing after. Once we finally get them, they tend to consistently underdeliver on what we thought they were going to do for us, right? We finally get the thing, and it's just not as deeply satisfying as we thought, right? We chase career, and we finally get that next rung up the ladder, and you're like, all right, I made it. And it's not that it's not satisfying for a moment, but over the long haul, there was this deep thing we're chasing after, and it's just like it didn't deliver. And so we fill our lives with things like sex or influence or chasing after popularity or significance or comfort and pleasure or fame and wealth and relationships and, my job and my kids and the stuff I own and what people think about me and what I wear. And right, we chase after all of these things, and then when we get our hands on them, they didn't quite deliver like we thought. So listen to C.S. Lewis' language around the fool. He says the fool, so again, this is just helping us put language with what Paul's talking about. The fool puts the blame of that frustration of getting our hands on something and it not delivering, that emptiness that we're constantly trying to fill. The fool puts the blame of that on things themselves. Don't miss this. This is so good. He goes on all his life thinking that if only he tried another woman or went for a more expensive holiday or whatever it is, then this time he would really catch that mysterious something that we're all after. Most of the bored, discontented, rich people in the world are of this type. They spend their whole lives trotting from woman to woman, from continent to continent, from hobby to hobby, always thinking that the latest is the real thing at last, and then always disappointed. This is Paul's idea of foolish living, of just setting our attention and our affection on whatever it is that we think is going to fill that hole and that gap. But then he also speaks to the wise way of living. Listen to the wise way of living here. C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity says the wise person, and again, this is from a biblical perspective. This is from the narrative of Scripture, okay? So you don't have to agree with this. But this is from the perspective of Jesus and the Scripture authors. The wise person says, if I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. Isn't that good? If none of my earthly pleasures satisfy it, that does not prove that the universe is a fraud. Probably earthly pleasures were never meant to satisfy it, but only to arouse it, to suggest the real thing. He goes on. He says, if that is so, I must take care, on the one hand, never to despise or be unthankful for these earthly blessings, and on the other, never mistake them for the something else of which they are only a kind of copy or echo or mirage, right? He's not trying to say, man, this world sucks, this life is pointless, don't chase anything, just like be a monk in a cave for Jesus. So no, like be thankful for the gift, but realize there's a gift giver behind it. This is so good, I must keep alive in myself the desire for my true country, which I shall not find until after death. I must never let it get snowed under or turned aside. I must make it the main object of life to press on to that other country and to help others do the same. He's talking about his relationship with Jesus, the kingdom of heaven coming to earth, Jesus making all things new. And he's like, I've got to keep it the central object of my affection. It's got to stay right here all of the time. And I can't just spend it on myself. I've got to bring as many people along for the ride as I can. You guys see that? That's what he's after. So what's the difference between wise and foolish living? It is what you worship. It's where you give your attention and your affection to. Listen to me, friends. God is interested in your worship, not because he's like an egomaniac. God is interested in your worship, in your heart, because you were made for him. And he knows that the very longings of your life are to be found in relationship with him. And he loves you so much, and he is so committed to that reality that he sent his son Jesus to step into time, to redeem the things that have been broken, to give us access into new life, to give us forgiveness over times of regret and brokenness, and bring us into all of that goodness. This is the invitation, and it's incredible. God knows that the deepest satisfaction of your heart is going to be in him. And then, listen, friends, there is a world and a life to the full, to enjoy to the full from its proper place. That is the invitation from Jesus. St. Augustine has a crazy story. I don't have time to give you all of it, but he wrote this really cool book called Confessions, and long story short, he was living a wild life and really wanted nothing to do with God. One of his famous prayers is God, give me self-control. Just not yet. I got a little more living to do, right? And so what's really cool is how he meets Jesus, and his story is incredible. You can read it on your own. But part of his story is like when he meets Jesus, his world is flipped upside down. He's the one that said, God, you have made our hearts restless, and they are restless until they find their rest in you. That's Augustine, okay? And so he wrote this prayer in that book, Confessions, and it starts by saying, too late have I loved you. Or late have I loved you, as in, man, I showed up to this way too late. I wish I would have said yes to this sooner. Listen to this prayer by St. Augustine. Too late have I loved you, O beauty so ancient and beauty so new. Too late have I loved you. You were within me, but I was outside myself, and I was seeking for you there. In my weakness, I ran after the beauty of the things you have made. You were with me, but I was not with you. The things you have made, they kept me from you. The things which would have no being unless they existed from you in the first place. But you called, and you cried, and you have pierced my deafness. You have radiated forth. You have shined out brightly and dispelled my blindness. You have sent forth your fragrance, and I have breathed it in. And I long for you. I have tasted, and I hunger and thirst for you. That's Augustine's prayer. Man, late have I loved you. And it is so good. I wish I would have got my hands on it sooner. I'm so late to this. And it's so good. You see, friends, Jesus is not after changing just our worldview. He wants to satisfy the deepest longings and desires of our hearts. So if we want to live wise lives, it starts there. Redeeming our time, you can look at your phone and say, man, God has so much more for me than that. This little terrorist in my pocket can take a back seat because there's so much more life to live. There's so much more love to receive and to give. You let your life be awakened to what is good and true and beautiful, and you live from that place. So, wisdom is not just calculating your decisions, which is helpful, right? Like, yes, we want to be aware of our time spent and redeem it and whatever. It's diving deeply into the most satisfying love imaginable. Does this make sense to you guys? So don't live careless lives, live careful lives. Don't live as foolish, right? When you use the language of godless, right? It's not meant to be an insult. It's just a life absent of God. Don't live foolish lives, but wise lives. And he goes on. You say, okay, great, Paul. Sounds great. Love that. How do we do it? And he wraps it up, verses 16 and then 18 through 20. He says, therefore, make the most of every opportunity. Once you get kind of your bearings, once you get a compass, your heart is oriented in the right direction and you're filled with the love of God, you keep coming back to that. Like once you begin to get that settled in you, and by the way, listen, it is never fully settled. The greatest battle of your entire life is going to believe every day, to wake up and truly believe that the God of the universe actually likes you, and he loves you, and he's for you, and he's got a plan and a purpose for your life. And there is foolish living, and there is wise living, and he wants to walk with you into that. But you wrestle that to the ground every day, and you come back to this place. Here's what Paul says. Make the most of every opportunity. Don't get drunk on wine, which leads to debauchery. Instead, be filled with the Spirit. That's Paul's answer. You want to make the most of this life. You don't want to squander a life. You want to have a life well lived. Listen, it is so easy to look at your 20s and just say, man, I've got an entire decade to figure life out and just burn it. And then you're going to get into your 30s and you're going to have so much regret because everything from your 20s just gets carried right into that decade too. Everywhere you go, there you are. And so it's not like wasting life, but redeeming it, letting God make the most of it. And so leverage, like how do we redeem the time? How do we make the most of it? To Paul's point, the Spirit of God in you is the answer. Not 5 hacks to better time usage, not atomic habits, which are great, by the way, dig those a lot, right? Not 7 habits to highly effective people. I'm fans of all of that. But the key to transformation of your time, the key to this trip around the sun being the best, it doesn't mean absent of conflict. It doesn't mean absent of burden, right? You're still shouldering life for sure. But the key to this year being making the most of every opportunity is God's Spirit in you. That's Paul's point. God's Spirit in you. Listen, it's interesting. He says, don't be filled with wine, which is debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit. So debauchery, that's a word we don't use a lot. That word very simply means like a life full of wastefulness or recklessness, right? And so if you're under the influence of alcohol, right, which Jesus wasn't down on a good drink, right? He like literally turned pots of water into the best wine imaginable at the end of a wedding, right? Jesus was like, let's go, okay? So like absolutely, we got Jesus who I think likes to party. At the same time, right, he is all about self-control, right? And so he says you can be filled with other stuff and lose control, or you can be filled with the Spirit of God and have self-control. That make sense? So what you're filled with matters. So here's the invitation. Don't waste your life being filled with lesser things, which is so easy to do. Be filled with the Spirit so you can make the most of every opportunity. Partner with God in making the most of every opportunity. So this is again, that conversation of walking the narrow path, wide invitation, a narrow path. This is the way of Jesus, right? The way of Jesus is not just an idea or a set of ethics. It is a way of life. I think the great struggle in the West of following Jesus is we love the idea of Jesus, and we might even want the life of Jesus, but then we resist and struggle to have the lifestyle of Jesus, to adopt the actual way of Jesus. It's an actual way of living. So he's saying, be careful where you put your feet, the words that you use, the places that you go, the things that you let in your ears, the people that you're around. Pay attention to where you're going. Now listen, let me give you just a couple of warnings as we wrap up our time together. I'm going to invite Daniel to come. Listen, if you're type A like me, I just want to warn you to be careful here, because there is a danger on the other side. Like this is not an invitation to be a time Nazi, okay? You guys tracking with me? Right? Like it's easy to like, make the most of every opportunity. And some of you type A's are like, yeah, let's go. And then if you're like me, the problem is you can be like really judgmental and like nitpicky around like I'm a little anal on how I use my time to a unhealthy degree. I might or might not be a time Nazi. And so this is my tendency. I can walk into a room and suck the life out of the room, right? This is not an invitation not to have fun. This is not an invitation not to live life to the full. This is not an invitation to be judgmental towards others. This is an invitation to evaluate your life, your season, your stage, and partner with the Spirit of God and say, God, who have you made me to be, and what have you given me to put my hands to? Right? There is an assumption in me at times that any amount of idleness is a complete waste, which is just simply not true, and that's so damaging, right? Like if you've been in a home where like if you're not moving around and there's no activity coming from you, if you're not being productive, you're a worthless human being. That's not what Paul is after here. So you actually have to learn to rest, to be with Jesus. Jesus is teaching. Martha's in the kitchen and Mary's sitting at his feet. And Martha's like, Jesus, aren't you going to tell Mary to help me in the kitchen? He's like, Martha's like, you're very busy and your heart's stirred up and you're unsettled, but Mary has chosen the better thing here. So Jesus is not about busyness and frenetic activity. He's make the most of every moment does not mean leverage every second like a time Nazi, okay? Is that clear? But it's also not permission to waste time. Here's one of the traps. It's so easy to fall into the trap of looking at someone else's season of life and comparing their fruit to mine. And that is really dangerous. Because you're not 35 years old probably, and you're not a dad of two, and you're not a pastor of a church, and you don't have two little kids and a wife and a startup business in Boulder. So I've got to ask the question, not just what would Jesus do, but what would Jesus do if he were me? If he had my stage of life, my season of life, right? Like if you're an empty nester and you got two small children, those are wildly different seasons of life. If you're in college and you're single versus young married or young professional, those are different seasons of life. You got to look at your season of life, not compare it to another's. What are my gifts? What are my limits? What is my calling? And listen, friends, like, it's not an excuse not to do anything. It is an invitation to discern with God what he has for you. Everything that God has for you, he has given you all that you need to step into it. You are not here on accident. You're not sitting in this room in 2025 in Boulder, Colorado on accident. God has plans and purposes for your life right now and right in front of you. As Seth and Maddie step into a new season, right? We believe that with everything in our hearts. He's got good plans and purposes for us. So what would Jesus do if he were me? Can I give you just a small hack to help you with that? Stephen Covey wrote the book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's beautiful. It's so good. Like, Just flipped my world upside down in my 20s. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of the things he tells us to do is to identify your roles, like your identity. He says, work through your identity so that you can give your time and attention and energy to the things that matter most, right? One of the reasons that we so easily give our time and attention and affection and energy away to things that don't matter is because we don't actually know who we really are. We don't let that stay in front of us. So you sit down with God and you say, God, who am I? And one of the things that I do pretty consistently in my journal as I'm walking with God is, okay, God, here's who I am. I'm a follower of Jesus. That's the loudest and most important thing about my identity. I'm a son of God. I've been adopted into the family. That's one of my identity roles. But I'm also a husband, right? That's unique to me and to Danielle, right? That's one of the roles, the gifts that God has given me to steward in this life. I'm a father to 2 small boys. And their stages of life matter too, so I'm watching that. I'm a pastor to an incredible church. I'm a business owner in Boulder. I'm a neighbor. I'm a brother. I'm a son, right? And I just kind of list out, who am I? And these things are true about me, right? You just put that on paper. And then you ask God very simply, based on like who I am, my roles, where should my time and attention and energy go? And you know what I know is true, and you already know what this is true about me too, and you probably know it's true about yourself as well, is because of the priority of those relationships, follower of Jesus, husband, father, I don't actually have a lot of time. I don't have 6 hours of video screen time to give every day. Because if I give it there, I won't give it to the places that matter most. And I might not have a marriage to enjoy in a few years. Or 2 boys that don't know the love of their dad and their identity hasn't been formed. Or a church that hasn't been cared for. Or people who don't know God that I was meant to have a conversation with. And neighbors and friends, right? Does that make sense? And not guilt and shame, but desire. I'd much rather give my time to those things that matter most. And it's really, really hard. So some of you, you're in the room, and the emotion, the dominant emotion of your heart and mind is regret. Because as we talk about these things, the thing on your mind is, man, if I could just go back. If I could just go back. Listen, friends, the incredibly good news about this invitation today is that Jesus is in the business of making things new, of bringing beauty out of ashes, of redeeming the things that have been broken. That is literally what Jesus came to do. If I could give you an invitation this week, open up Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, the first 4 stories, biographies of Jesus in the New Testament, and just saturate your mind with the narrative and the story of Jesus. What would Jesus do if he were me? Just let that narrative dominate your worldview for a week and see what priorities pop up. See the affection of God take over your heart. Get a vision of redeeming your time because God has a desire to partner with you. You might be here and you're like, man, I've screwed up so much. There's no way. Listen, God can redeem anything. In fact, there's a good chance, if we just pass the microphone around, there's a good chance that there's a room full of people today that said, man, I have royally screwed up my life and Jesus has totally made it new. Right? That's my story. Is it your story? I totally screwed up my life for 15 years straight. And I met Jesus and he flipped it all upside down. And guess what? Then I still screwed up my life some more and he came back and fixed it again. And again, and guess what? This week, I screwed up my life some more and he came back and redeemed it again. Jesus says, partner with me in a life that is worth living. Let me give you a couple of next steps and we're done. Number 1, this is helpful to you. This is a resource, the ruthless elimination of hurry. We can't speak all the way into the time-sensitive constructs today. So this resource, we center our church around practicing the way of Jesus together in Boulder. So wise living and some of the things that we're talking about today, they come back to the disciplines of structuring our life, kind of like a trellis where a vine will grow, right? Like there are structures we put into place to help this life thrive. This book is a beautiful invitation with some of the core practices that we teach consistently. The ruthless elimination of hurry. If you haven't picked it up, I highly recommend it. It's a good resource if you want to dig in and redeem some of this time or revisit some of the practices like silence and solitude and Sabbath into your life. In addition, we're in the middle of this fast, 21 days of fasting and prayer, right? And the whole invitation here is to keep hungering after God, right? To let food and other things that we're moving from our lives create a hunger in us and then pointing that hunger toward God. To say, God, I want that, but I want you even more. And to keep elevating that reality of wise living in front of us, that what I worship matters. to saturate our mind in the scriptures every day and to pray and then walk with Jesus throughout our day. Listen, some people in our community right now are doing what we called an influence fast a couple of weeks ago, which is removing social media and some of that screen time or screen time altogether, like those types of things from their lives. And can I just remind you of this? That God might use 21 days to break you from some of the addictions that are just so happily bombarding your attention every day. And at the end of 21 days, it's not to fall right back into just all of this. Like, part of it is to evaluate how these 21 days have gone, the withdrawals that I've had, the time that I've gained, what I have done with it, and maybe not to allow some of those things back into our lives, or at least to limit them. Like, to this day, listen, I'm just my example. I've got limits on every amount, like every access of media in my life has limits. Daniel has the password to my phone. It's so frustrating sometimes because I can't unlock stuff. But like social media is limited on my phone to like 5 minutes on both apps. I can't watch videos. I can only I've got it down to like a dumb phone. Like it's a super calculator at this point, right? But what I have learned is I'm not disciplined enough to be like, oh yeah, I'm just for a minute. My willpower runs out at the end of the day. You know what I want to do? Waste time. Even though I know there's nothing on the other side of it, I absolutely will sit there for an hour and waste my entire energy on some stupid show that wasn't good for me or my heart and didn't do me any good for the rest for my soul, right? So I'm just an example. The fast might give you some tools entering back into normal life where you change things, right? Okay. I'm going to invite you to stand with me. We're going to wrap up our time. We're going to sing. We're going to pray. We're going to worship. Listen, don't let guilt and shame, they're very rarely from God. Don't let those two emotions be the driving force here. Let a vision for a life that Jesus has on offer be the motivating factor for influence and change. So maybe God, as we're talking, already put something on his heart, on your heart and mind. He started to put his finger on that thing that needs to change, that relationship that needs to change, those limits that need to change, that conversation that needs to happen with a friend, or that obsession that you've been giving all your attention and affection toward. Maybe there's regret that he's dealing with, like, man, you need to redeem time here. And he's like, I'll meet you in that, and I'll bring back life to the things that are broken. Whatever it is, like, man, if you need healing, get it today. If you need wholeness, get it today. If you need forgiveness, get it today. If time needs to be redeemed, God is available today. He's not hiding. He's not scarce. He's here with us working. And so I'm going to invite my prayer team to come. We have a prayer team that's going to be at the front and the back of the room. And this prayer team is going to be here to serve you in prayer. So whether it's what God is working on you personally that you're going to go partner with him in prayer for, asking God to meet you in that space, or you're partnering with them in prayer on the behalf of someone else, whatever it is, this prayer team is there to serve you. The assumption every week when we gather is that God is working and he is speaking. There are things that he has been highlighting in our hearts and minds, and so then we move our bodies in response. We sing songs and we flip open our hands to say, God, I give this to you. We raise our hands in worship and adoration because as we're filled with the Spirit, we recognize, God, you're the true space of affection and desire in my life. We go and move in prayer because we say, yes, God, I hear you and I want to follow you. You're good and you're trustworthy. So all of our response is met because of God's activity in our own hearts and minds. So I'm going to pray for us, and then we're going to sing, we're going to worship, and we're going to respond. So God, thank you for this room. Thank you for my friends. Thank you for this church. Thank you for the family that you're building. And God, thank you for the reminder of making the most of this life. Not nitpicking it to death and being scared that we're wasting it, but also not foolishly looking up and wondering where all the time has gone. But rather leaning in, God, who have you made me to be? What do you say about me? What have you given me to do? Jesus, you have a mission that you want to invite me into. You have others that you want me to introduce to you. You have a life to live. You have a craft to give. There's so much identity and purpose in walking with you. And God, at the core of it, those deep longings and desires of our heart, some of us are wondering, is it really true? Are you really that good? Can you really do that in my life? Can you really meet the deep longings of my soul? Jesus, would it be true today? With some of my friends in the room who have never trusted in you, would they trust in you today? Much like I did when I was 15, it was this clunky prayer of, Jesus, I don't know if any of this is legit, but it sounds pretty dang good. I'll give it a try. If you can forgive me, will you do it? If you can give me life, will you do it? If you can reorient purpose and desire, can you do it? If you can fill this emptiness and repair this brokenness, will you do it? And for some of my friends in the room, today is the day. Much like Augustine, late have I loved you. This is something so beautiful and so true that I wish I would have known so much longer ago, so much longer than I have now, but man, it's so good, and I'm so glad I have it now. Would you do the same for my friends in the room that don't know you yet? For some of my friends, the next step is baptism. It's celebrating externally what you've done on the inside. For some of them, it's community. It's joining a city group so that they can have others who help them walk this life carefully and wisely. For some of them, it's growth track. It's just the next steps. It's stepping into this community and beginning to learn what it means to live the life that you have called them to. God, whatever it is that you have for us, would we respond because you're trustworthy and good? It's in Jesus' name. Amen.